We want to welcome our online church. If you're joining us online, we're so happy that you're with us today and you just happen to click on the right sermon. Maybe you're not watching live, but you're watching later in the week, and God knew that you needed this today. I'm so happy to be back with my people in God's house. I'm so happy to be back in this place. It's good to see you. Russ, my brother, good to see you, brother, in the house today. Oh, man, it's so good to see my brother Milt right there. Schoon sitting in his spot where he needs to be. I just love my people, man. I love my people. Paul, how you doing, brother? Good to see you, man. Hey, what's up, Jeff Boney? How you doing, brother? Everybody's saying, I don't know, Jody Shaw out there and Luke Shaw looking like a good-looking family out there. Isn't it just good to be with people that you know and love and that you just... do you have people in your life that when you see them, you smile? Okay, let me help you out. Grandparents, talking about your grandkids. Let's be honest, you see those little babies and you smile right away, right, Tom Darpino? Yes, you do, sir. You look good as a grandpa, by the way, brother. You do. Oh, man, it's good to be with people that you love. And, you know, my wife and I, we took some time away, and last week I was back in the house, but we had a guest speaker, and so it's just good to be back in the place where I can speak and share my heart with all of you. We took a trip, and, you know, it's great to take trips. It's great to get away. It's great to get rest. It's great to get refreshed. You know, but we were heading back, and on our way back from Florida, which, by the way, we flew this time. We have driven many times to Florida, and can I tell you, I don't know if I'll drive again. It's a nice thing to eat breakfast at home and lunch in Florida. It's a lot quicker than driving. And when you got kids, man, it is a blessing. It is a blessing. We got there and we had a good time, and you know, we got to minister with our brothers and sisters in Christ, Encounter Church down there. We got to take some time as a family. You know, we were heading back. We had a rental car. There was a certain time that the rental company opened, and that we had to make sure that we, you know, got there because, you know, they kind of looking at our flight. Our flight was in the morning. So we got there, you know, early, very early at the rental car company, like right when they opened. And, you know how things go. Things just took a little longer than we expected it to take. And so we're in there just kind of, you know, waiting, and we're just like, man, I hope this shuttle comes quick, you know, and then we finally, you know, shuttle gets there. We're finally, you know, ready to get on the shuttle to get back to the airport, and it's like they're waiting for this other family that just got in. We're like, oh man, it's got to go. We got to go now. But we got there. We got to the airport, and you know, it was just that feeling of like, okay, we're getting to the airport later than we want to get there, but we've done this many times. We've traveled many times internationally. This isn't going to take too long. This is a domestic flight, and you know, so we'll be fine. So we're going through, and we get our bags checked in, and we get through the line, and we're getting to security. And how many just love the airport security? Just look forward to it every time. The opportunity to take your shoes off and just strip down butt naked for them to just get you right through. It seems like that, doesn't it? Kind of. And so, you know, we're in that line, security, you know, just waiting to get to the point where we can get through and get to our gate. And we got to this spot where it was like breaking into like 4 different spots, you know. So the line broke into like all these little channels. And so, you know, you just have to kind of choose a channel. And we chose the wrong channel. God, I was watching this other channel move and move and move, and these people were going through, and I'm like, how do we end up in this little... And we're standing there, and I know my wife. I can feel my wife. She's not saying anything, but I can feel her discomfort, okay? And I'm just, because you ever do this as a spouse, like when you feel your spouse, you just kind of don't make eye contact? So I'm just looking like, she's not mad at me. She doesn't do that, but she's just mad at the situation, rightfully so. And I'm like, I'm just trying to contain myself because I'm like, okay, we're going to be okay. And the kids are asking questions like, Dad, why isn't the line moving? And I'm like, it's okay. And this is where you practice telling yourself what you need to hear, but you actually tell your children, but you really actually need it yourself. So I'm telling my kids, I'm like, oh, it's going to be fine. We got time. We're good. We got plenty of time. We're going to get through. It's no problem. I'm telling them when actually I need it. I'm actually telling myself. And the time is just clicking and clicking and clicking and clicking. And I'm watching the time just click, 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 click. And we are not moving. And I look over and I'm watching the belt. Like something went wrong with the belt that puts the bags through. Nothing's going through. All the other lines, I mean, flying. These people are just moving through the line like this. Like they can't even keep up with the person in front of them. And I'm just waiting. And I'm just standing there like, it's going to be okay. It's okay. Dad, are we going to go? What's going on? It's okay. We're okay. And with each word of reassurance, I'm feeling less and less confident with my answer. And we finally, something went wrong with the belt that was moving the bags through, and we ended up in the security line for about an hour and 15 minutes, just in the security portion of our trip. And so by the time we get to the other side of security, my phone rings. I literally was getting my shoes on, and my phone rings, and I look at the number, and it's a number I don't know. Thank God I answered that call, and I pick up the call, and the voice on the other side said, "Is this Mr. Terry?" I said, "Yes, it is." She says, "Are you almost to the gate?" And I said, "We had a problem with security, and we just got through." And she said, as a matter of fact, "If you're not here in 5 minutes, the plane will be leaving without you." And at that point, my shoes are on, my bags are in hand, and I look at my family, I'm like, we gotta go. All this settled calmness. I had somebody tell me recently I have a chill spirit. It wasn't there in that moment. It was gone. We're moving. So I'm running. We get over to where we need to go. The gate, this section of gates goes this way. This section of gates goes this way. I see the section we need to go, and it's a train that we got to get on to get to the gate area. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And we get over there, and the second I get there, the train pulls up and the doors open. But my kids and my wife, they were a little bit further behind. So I'm looking at this door, and I know how this works because I've been to airports. That door doesn't stay open long, and the train's filling up, and my family's not there. So what do? I position myself in front of the door, and I decide I'm going to hold this thing open if I have to. My family's getting on. And they're coming, and I get one kid that comes first, and I'm literally like, you gotta run! Okay? So they're running. We get on the train, and the door kept trying to hit me. I'm like, nope, not today, door. They get on the train. We're on the train. I'm sure everybody on that train was probably so bothered at us, right? Because I held it up. I didn't care. And I'm on that train, the doors closed. At this point, we're talking full-on dad pep talk. I'm like, guys, when we get off this train, we are full sprint to the gate. I just got off the phone. 2 minutes ago, they told me we have 5 minutes. That means we have 3 minutes. And so at that point, my daughter Honor, God bless her little 7-year-old bladder that had been holding itself the whole hour and 15 minutes in the security line. She's doing this, and she's like, I'm not going to be able to keep up. And she starts crying. She's got to pee so bad. And she starts crying, and my wife, she just gets into full support mode. She's like, you got this, babe. You can do it. So we get through. The train stops. The doors open, and we are sprinting. I'm literally knocking old ladies over. In my mind, I am. But I'm like, whatever it takes, we are sprinting. And my little 7-year-old daughter's like, just got her little legs, are just like, she's going as fast as she can. We get to the gate. I have never had this happen in my whole life. We get to the gate, all of us out of breath, And the lady at the gate goes, "Are you Mr. Terry?" I go, "Yes." She goes, "Jared, Tara, Grace, Josh, Honor?" I go, "Yes." She goes, "Get on the plane." Didn't even check our boarding passes, nothing. At that point, any Mr. Terry could have gotten a free flight. And I get on the plane. I'm seriously on the plane at that point. I'm like, this is a miracle of God that I made it on this flight. It was an absolute miracle. Like, literally, as we get on the plane, everybody's just giving us the side eye, like, really? My daughter, my poor daughter, man. And it was in that moment that I realized just how uncomfortable it is when you feel like you don't have enough. Just how uncomfortable it can be in life when there's not enough. The title of my message today is Not Enough. And some of you have been dealing with the feeling that you don't have enough time. My grandpa, I've said this before, I just think it's really, really funny. One of my dad's, my dad is from Oklahoma, okay? And my mom's from Holland. My mom's dad, so my grandpa on my mom's side, would say that he would say, "My greatest enemy is time." My grandpa on my dad's side, one of his famous lines was, "We got nothing but time. Got nothing but time." And he moved like it too. Drove me crazy. I got more of my mom's side in me in that regard. I gotta go, gotta move. You got nothing but time. But it can be an uncomfortable feeling when you don't have enough time. The older I get, the more I realize how quickly time passes. The more I watch my kids grow, the way I am placed between my children and my parents, and I'm watching the shift within both, and I'm just looking at time differently. But it's not just time that we can feel that about. We can feel like I don't have enough love for this marriage. We can feel like I don't have enough discipline. I don't have enough discipline to really commit to the goals that I want in life. We can feel like I don't have enough money to pay the bills, to take care of the needs. We can feel like I don't have enough energy to give in all the different places that are demanding of me. And one of the most uncomfortable feelings in life is the feeling of not enough. And yet, it's so common. And the scripture that I want to preach from this morning is in Matthew chapter 17. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there with me. Matthew chapter 17, verse 14 to 20. It says, "At the foot of the mountain, a large crowd was waiting for them. A man came and knelt before Jesus and said, 'Lord, have mercy on my son. He has seizures and suffers terribly. He often falls into the fire or into the water. So I brought him to your disciples, but they couldn't heal him.' Jesus said, 'You faithless and corrupt people, how long must I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me.' Then Jesus rebuked the demon in the boy, and it left him from the moment the boy was well. Afterward, the disciples asked Jesus privately, 'Why couldn't we cast out that demon?' And look, here it is. You don't have enough." I want you to say those three words with me. You don't have enough. Say it again. You don't have enough faith. I tell you the truth, if you had faith even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, "Move from here to there," and it would move. Nothing would be impossible. I want to just say those words again. You don't have enough. God, I thank you that this day you desire to speak to our hearts and give us a word that we desperately need. We're ready. we desire to receive from you. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to begin by talking to you about the source of not enough. And although there's, I'm sure, a lot more than what I'm going to break down for you, I felt like the Lord led me to three specific places that are the source of not enough. Now, before I start with that, I just want to do a quick check in the room. And if you don't feel like comfortable, to be honest and stuff like that, that's cool. I'm a type of leader that I'm real. And I share my stuff. I'd rather tell you a story about how I really messed it up badly, that we could all learn from that, than a story about how I got everything right. And I'm very open about my testimony, my journey, my path. And I think that honesty is important when it comes to us approaching God. I think that we need to be transparent and honest and real. And so I try to lead in that way, and I hope that creates an atmosphere that allows you to do the same. How many of you, and I'm going to start actually by raising mine because it's an absolute yes for me. How many of you have ever struggled with feelings of not enough in some way in your life, in some way in your life? And maybe you could put your hand down. Maybe you have been going through that, and it actually is something that you're dealing with right now in a very specific way in your life. It's a very debilitating feeling, and actually it can be the scariest and produce the most amount of fear in our lives when we lose the ability to control the outcome of a situation, and it's within that we don't have enough. It's another thing when we can do something about it. It's another thing when we maybe just have to choose different decisions in our life, and we can get back to where we need to be. It's another thing when we've done all we can do. We've done all that we can do, and yet we don't have enough. And in this story, what we have here is we have a father that had done all that he could do for his son. He had taken him for treatments. He had brought him to different medical professionals. They had done all that they could do, and this father had gotten to a point where no matter what he did, it seemed like he couldn't fix the problem with his son. And one of the most painful feelings of not enough is when we don't only experience it in our own lives, but we watch our children go through something and suffer through something, and then we, as a parent, everything in us wants to change the situation for them on their behalf, but yet we can't. We don't have enough. And when the Bible, gives us this story, we can read about it from some of the different gospel writers, and different gospel writers give us different details. But one of the gospel writers tells us that Jesus had asked him how long this had been going on, and he said from the time he was a child. And so you hear in this story, you have a father that's dealing with his son with an issue that isn't just it hasn't just popped up in their life, and now all of a sudden they're in this new realm of having to discover what to do and how to take care of a problem. But it's something that they had been dealing with for quite a long time. And so because this had been going on for so long, I imagine that this man had heard some stories about the healer. He had heard some stories about a man that was healing blind people, and a man that was causing the lame to walk, and a man that was causing the deaf to hear. And he had heard these stories, and maybe that hopelessness that he was experiencing in his not enough, maybe there was this little flicker of hope when he heard that this man Jesus was going to be somewhere that he could get to. He was going to be able to go to the place where he was. And so he finds himself reaching out and trying to get to that place that he could help his son, because he doesn't have enough. He's been dealing with this for a very long time. And that's really the people in the story that you can easily look at and go, this is the subject of the story. This is the main character in the story. The main character is this little boy that is dealing with demonic oppression. And actually, when it talks about his condition, the actual word there translates moonstruck, which means like lunatic. Like that there was a spiritual condition that was taking place. Other gospel writers talk about epilepsy, which is a physical condition that he had, but there is an acknowledgement by his father that this was something spiritual beyond just the epilepsy. This was something spiritual taking place in his life. And it looks like in the story that the main subject is this little boy and his father, and their desperation of feeling like they don't have enough to take care of the problem. But what I want to focus in on in this story is not so much the little boy and his father, but the disciples. Because when Jesus said that the problem was that they didn't have enough, he wasn't speaking to the father. When Jesus said the problem was that they didn't have enough, he was speaking to his disciples. And so what had happened was the disciples, they had tried their best to deal with the situation, and it didn't resolve. And Jesus, meanwhile, he's on the Mount of Transfiguration with Peter, James, and John. He's revealing to these three his glory, and they're seeing him in his glory and his wonder. He comes down off the Mount of Transfiguration into a scene where there's commotion and there's arguing. There's religious people that are there, and they're accusing the disciples that they're handling the situation the wrong way, because the religious people always want to point their finger and accuse and bring condemnation. Okay, because religion oftentimes makes you feel a weight and puts a weight on you, but gospel pulls a weight off of you. They're putting weight on these disciples. You didn't do this right. You didn't do that right. They're pointing their finger, and the disciples are dealing with this, and they're doing their best, but it didn't work. It didn't work. Have you ever prayed a prayer and it didn't work? Raise your hand. Have you ever done what God said in his word and it didn't work? Raise your hand. I mean, I have. Have you ever believed God for something and it didn't happen? Raise your hand. I have. And that's what they're experiencing. And so the focus that I want to bring us in on, and what I want to lean into in this story, is the conversation that happens after the conversation that happens after the disciples do their absolute best to help this boy, and it's between them and Jesus. I imagine that by this time, the little boy, he's healed. He's not dealing with this demon anymore. He's in his right mind. I mean, he can see clearly. And I imagine that at this point, they've gotten away from the crowd. They've gotten into a place of privacy, and they have to ask Jesus this question: Jesus, why couldn't we heal the boy? Why couldn't we cast out that demon? And that's where the answer that Jesus gives about not enough. I want to talk to you about the source of not enough. The source of not enough. And I want to just point to you three things about the source of not enough. If you've been dealing with the feeling of not enough in your life, I want you to drill down into that feeling, and I want you to know that it's about more than just what you're dealing with. So let's use this story. These disciples, they really had that feeling of not enough because they tried to help a boy and they couldn't. That's why. That's the source. But if we stop there, we're not getting deep enough. I have this feeling of not enough because I couldn't pay my bill. I have this feeling of not enough because I tried to fix the problem in my marriage and it's still there. I have this feeling of not enough because I don't look the way I want to look. I'm not at the weight I want to be at. I'm not, and I'm frustrated. And that might be true, that there are some things in your life that are causing you to feel like you're not enough. But what I want to do is I want to get beneath them. And the first thing I want to show you about the source, because we're not talking about the experience of not enough, right? I remember one time I went to go pay a bill. I thought the bill was a certain amount. I got there. I found out it was a greater amount. I had to pay the bill in cash, and I had to leave because I didn't have enough cash. That wasn't a great feeling, right? And I literally didn't have enough money to pay the bill. I did, but I had to go get it and leave and come back, and that was not a great feeling. And so sometimes there is an experience we have that makes us feel like we're not enough. But what I want to talk to you about first is I want to talk to you about the source of not enough. that there might be some things that are beneath that experience that are driving and fueling that feeling in you of not enough. And the first thing that I want to identify, and again, I'm sure there's much more than these three. These are the three I felt led to share with you. The first source that I want to point to of not enough is comparison. Comparison will always leave you feeling like you're not enough. And I wanted to show you in the scripture, I want to show you that what these disciples were believing for, it wasn't far-fetched. It wasn't something that they were believing for that was like, wow, you're gonna perform an exorcism? Whoa, that's a big deal. Like, these guys were believing for something that they had already experienced. Look at Matthew 10, verse 1. It says, Jesus called his 12 disciples to him, and he gave them authority. Say, gave authority. He gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. So they've already been given the authority to do what they were believing for in that moment. Look at Matthew 10:8. Jesus says this, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. This is Jesus speaking. Freely you have received, freely give. So they were given the authority over the demonic realm. They were told by Jesus to exercise that authority. Luke 10:17, the 72 returned, so they had gone out. They had the authority from Jesus to cast out demons. They were told to use the authority that Jesus gave them, and now they're returning from being out there and doing their ministry, and it says they returned with joy. Say joy. You know why they had joy? Because they said, Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name. Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name. And so now they were given authority by Jesus. They were told to use the authority. They used the authority, and it worked. It worked. The demons were leaving people, and people were being set free, and they were so excited. And may I add, these are things that happened before the experience they had with the little boy. So now they're in this same type of a situation, dealing with a demonic presence that's strong. And if you're somebody that's like, yeah, I don't know about that stuff, it's because of the culture that you live in. I've been to Africa. I've been to places in the world. I've been to Asia. I've been to other places in this world where we talk about these things and it's like, of course. Because they're experiencing it in their lives. Our culture wants to give everything a name. It wants to diagnose everything, and it wants to give everything a scientific reason as to why it exists and why it's there, and it wants to say that these spiritual things aren't actually spiritual things. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the culture we live in. And so you're living in that culture where everybody around you is constantly questioning that these things that are spiritual things are real things, and yet, they are. And one of the best things that the enemy could have is our ignorance toward his work. One of the best things the enemy could have is the people of God testifying that he's not there. How incredible is that? He doesn't even have to rally up his troops. He can just use God's people to claim that he doesn't exist, that he's not there, that he's not at work. But he is. And these disciples, they had been experiencing this demonic darkness. I looked into the eyes of a boy in the jungle in Ecuador, and I was there with my brother Luke. I was there with my brother Casey. The three of us looked in his eyes, and we saw the darkness. He spoke about a man on a horse with chains that was causing him to live in bondage. And we saw the darkness in his eyes. I can't explain it to you any other way. All I can tell you is that it's real. It exists. this spiritual darkness, this power. And they knew it, and they knew that they needed a power greater than themselves. And they were given it by Jesus, an authority and a mandate to go out and use that authority. And then they had joy because they saw Jesus setting people free. And now in this situation, it didn't work. And what do we find? We find them comparing their current situation to their former situations. Sometimes the comparison trap is actually you comparing yourself to your former self. Man, I remember when I was fit. I remember when I had joy. I remember when we were in love. I remember when I loved to go to work. I remember when I did great things for God. Why can't I do that anymore? I've heard it said that comparison is the thief of joy. And sometimes we don't even need to compare ourselves to others because we do a really good job of beating ourselves up by comparing ourselves to ourselves. Jesus, I know it worked before, but it's not working now. It's not working now. I was just, you ever play pickleball? Yo, that is taking over the world. I'm telling you, they're putting pickleball courts up everywhere. Don't be laughing at pickleball, man. That thing is legit. And I was playing pickleball. In Florida, they play pickleball like crazy. Everybody's into pickleball. And I was playing pickleball with some friends in Florida, and they were like really good. They played all the time. So I'm over there. I'm not going to get beat. And I hadn't played pickleball much in my whole life, but I just kind of use the things I learned from other sports, and I'm just trying to do, I'm running. And I'm running so hard, and all of a sudden I'm like, I like kind of twisted my ankle. My friend laughed at me. He's like, Jared, he's like, you're not 20 anymore. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm going to act like I am. And every time I take time away from the gym, but you go back to the gym, you remember what the weight you used to lift and what you used to do. So you get back in there, you think you're going to do it, and you can't. I had gotten away from running for a little while. I needed to get back into running, so I got into running. All of a sudden, I was dealing with such bad pain, like right in my knee. I thought I tore my ACL or something like that. I went over to a friend of mine who's a physical therapist, and she's looking at my knee. I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like I couldn't even put pressure on it. And she's asking me all these questions. The questions were like, okay, what do you do? What have you been doing? Running, this, that. How long have you been running? And she's like, okay, so when did you start? I'm like, a week ago. Oh, how much you running? Like 4 miles. Or what's the pace you're running at? Well, as fast as I can. And you have to understand, this is the nature of your pastor. Like, we're going to go. We're into running. We're going to go. And she's like, okay, so you weren't running at all, and now you're running 4 miles as fast as you can. And I'm like, yeah. What's wrong with my knee? She's like, that's what's wrong with your knee. I'm like, no, I have a problem. She's like, no, that's the problem. You're the problem. I'm like, well, what do I do? She's like, do this. And stop. Ease in. Take it slower. I'm like, okay. You're not what you were. And that can be hard to accept. You're not what you were. And the source of not enough is you comparing yourself to yourself. I feel the Spirit of God telling me to tell somebody right now, I don't want you to be what you were. That was for them. This is a new season. Stop trying to recreate the old blessings. Stop trying to recreate the old joy, the old experiences, the old miracles. For behold, I am doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? We compare ourselves to ourselves, and we also, here's what else we do. We compare ourselves to others. I wrote this down. I want to read it because I don't want to say it any different than how I wrote it. I highlighted it. I feel like this is for somebody today. Most of us don't want to keep wrestling with feelings of not enough. Now, let me pause there before I read the rest of what I wrote. How many love that feeling of not enough? Okay, because when I asked how many were experiencing it, I think it was most of the room. And when I asked who loved it, nobody did. Most of us, we don't want to keep wrestling with the feelings of not enough, and yet, say, and yet. Say, and yet. And yet, we're unwilling to remove the destructive social structures that are embedding the not enough narrative deep into our psyche. I'm going to talk about one. I'm sure there's others. Social media. I'm going to scroll through filtered pictures of people who look better than me. May I emphasize filtered? And then wonder why I struggle with feelings that I don't look good enough. I remember years ago, I would scroll through to see other ministries. And I was in that season of my life dealing with the constant feeling that we weren't doing enough in this ministry. I kept feeling like we weren't reaching enough people. I kept feeling like we weren't big enough. I kept feeling like we weren't doing enough for God. And it took God revealing to me that all of this time scrolling through other ministries was fueling, sourcing the feelings that I had of not enough. What I wonder is, if we want to be free from the feeling of not enough, are we willing to remove the destructive social structures that are embedding that into our psyche? Here's what those destructive social structures do. Step one, make you feel, first of all, step one, make you feel like you're not enough. Step two, present their product as the solution to your not enoughness. Man, if I could just get that product, then. And there's some crazy things out there, man. They make a lot of claims. My favorite is, don't change a thing about your life. Just sprinkle this on your food and you'll lose tons of weight. Awesome. I need that. Just sprinkle that on my fries and queso and just watch the pounds fall off. Oh, so I don't have to change anything? I could just get this product? After they've presented the solution to your not enoughness, they sell you their product. You know what step 4 is? Repeat steps 1 through 3. Keep making you feel like you're not enough. Keep selling you the product that would be the answer to your not enoughness. And keep getting you to buy it. If you don't step back and understand that all that time scrolling has made you the product, you're the product. Your time. Your time is what companies are paying for to put ads in front of you. We were just having this conversation with our kids because we want to teach them these things young. Here's a good exercise for you. Go through your phone and check the usage of your apps. How much time a day on average do you spend on these apps? and then step back and say, what's that producing in me? Is there a connection between you comparing yourself to others and your feeling of not enough? And if you want to be free from the feeling of not enough, are you willing to remove the destructive social structures that are driving that? What is the source of not enough? We talked about comparison. The next thing I want to talk about, what would make us feel like we're not enough? Self-sufficiency. If there was one that I could say I'd raise my hand for and say, that's me, it's this one. It's take it on my shoulders. It's make it happen. It's do it myself. It's fix the problem. It's I'll get it done. It doesn't matter how bad it is. We can take care of it. But we oftentimes is me, isn't it? Self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency. Notice the disciples' response to Jesus. Their response was not, Jesus, thank you so much for coming. We were trying to help this boy, and this dad was desperate. You should have seen him. He was on his knees. I mean, I know when you walked up, like, things weren't working. It didn't work. But thank you so much for coming, because you knew the exact moment that we needed your help. You knew the exact moment that we needed you to step in and take care of the problem. And right in that moment, you showed up, and we couldn't take care of it, but you did. Jesus, you're so good. Thank you for your faithfulness to us to be there in our desperate moment and make this happen and take care of this problem. Thank you so much, Jesus. That wasn't their response to Jesus. Their response to Jesus was, why couldn't we do it? Why couldn't we do it? Why couldn't we cast out that demon? And they were focused on themselves. They were focused on their failed performance. They were focused on their not enoughness. They weren't focused on Jesus and what he had come to do. They weren't focused on the fact that he came through when they needed him most. What they were so bothered by was why they couldn't do it themselves. And this oftentimes is one of the biggest contributors to not enoughness, is that to that feeling of not enough, is that we are trying to do it ourselves. We're trying to take care of it ourselves. Many people, they come to Christ, they surrender their life to Jesus, and then they have the misconception that now it's up to them to live this life for him. But you see, Christianity is not, it is by grace, it is by grace through faith that you are saved. Now go out and do your part. Christianity is that it is by grace through faith that you are saved. Day after 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 day. It still takes grace. It still requires grace. It still needs grace. It's still the grace of God coming and showing up for me in the moments that I desperately need him. After a day of being saved, after a month of being saved, after a year of being saved, after 10 years of being saved, after living for Christ, more and more and more and more and more. The more I live for Christ, the more I realize that it is by grace. It is by grace that I live for Christ. It is by grace that I live for Christ. And it is not by our works that no man may boast. It is by grace that I live for Christ. It is by grace that I live for. It is his grace showing up for me when I didn't deserve it. It's his grace forgiving me when I didn't deserve it. It's his grace loving me and giving me strength when I didn't have the strength myself. It is his grace upon 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 grace. It's not self-sufficiency, because as long as I'm falling into the trap of self-sufficiency, I'm going to constantly be plagued by a feeling of not enough, because he never expected me to live that way to begin with. It's by grace. It's by grace upon 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 grace. You need his grace today just as much as you needed his grace when you first surrendered your life to him and said, Jesus, I can't do this anymore. I need your grace. You still need his grace today. You need his grace. You need his grace. It is by grace that you have breath in your lungs. It is by grace that you have your physical body. It is by grace that you have the ability to speak. It is by grace that you have the ability to do anything that is good. Anything that is good is by grace. It is by grace alone. It is by grace alone that you can do anything. It's by grace alone that you can do anything. These disciples thought they did something wrong. What we miss because before it worked and this time it didn't. And I wonder if he wanted them to remember that it was always by his grace. I wonder if they didn't actually do it wrong, perform wrong. I wonder if there was something about what Jesus was making sure that they knew. That you're always going to need me. You're always going to need me. This is way more than a 1-week sermon. I'm not even a third of the way through. Come back next week because there's some more I feel I need to give you. Bow your heads and close your eyes with me this morning. Would you do that? Oh, Jesus. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your grace, Jesus. It's not comfortable to feel not enough. Sometimes you might not be expecting this. You might be surprised to hear it. Sometimes it was his grace that let you feel not enough. I hear this sometimes, when somebody says, I'm not enough, I just can't, I'm not good enough. And then the person responds, you go, you are enough. I hear somebody say, I just don't feel worthy. Just heard this recently. Somebody said that. Somebody looked at them and they go, you are worthy. There's always a good intention behind that encouragement. But if we're worthy, why do we need a Savior? If we're enough, why did Jesus need to go to the cross? Sometimes it's his grace that lets you feel your not enoughness. All I know is whenever I do, I bend my knee and I ask God to forgive me for my self-sufficiency. I thank him for reminding me that it's not by might, it's not by power, but it's by his Spirit. And I'm brought back in. I'm brought back in where I'm not looking at my past self. I'm not looking at others. And I'm not trying to take the weight on my own shoulders. I'm brought back in where I'm looking at him. And I bend my knee. And I surrender. Thank you, Jesus, that you knew that in my own efforts, with my own strength, I would never be enough. And that's why you came. Everything I need. Can we sing it out? I just think it's amazing because the worship team didn't know what I was preaching, and yet they sang this song. Can we sing it out? Everything I need. Everything I need. Everything I need. Our Father has it. Our Father has it. Every single time the Lord will provide. Our Father has it. Our Father has it. Come on, can you stand up to your feet right now with me? How are we going to respond to this word? The only way we can respond, we're going to give him worship. We're going to reposition our heart and acknowledge that everything we need is in him. Come on, lift up your hands to the Lord right now. If you're feeling like not enough, if you've been feeling like you don't have enough time, you don't have enough love, you don't have enough discipline, you don't have enough money, you don't have enough to take care of the problems, you don't have the answers, you don't have the wisdom, you don't know, I'm here to remind you, everything you need, your Father has it. Come on, let's sing it out. Let's sing it out. It's everything I need, everything I need. Our Father has it. Our Father has it. Every single time the Lord will provide. Our Father has it. Come on, sing it again. Our Father has it. Everything I need, everything I need. Our Father has it. Our Father has it. Every single time the Lord will provide. Our Father has it. Our Father has it. I want to just remind you that Jesus didn't walk up to that moment. He didn't walk up to that moment and see their comparison and see their self-sufficiency. He didn't walk up and go, man, really guys? And then walk away disappointed with them. He walked into that moment and he provided what they needed. Jesus is here today and he sees where you've been living, and he sees the place that you've been in, and he sees some of your failures and flaws and faults. He sees some of the things that you've been feeding on that have been reproducing these feelings in you of not enough. And he's not just, man, really? Figure it out and let me know. He's meeting you right now to give you what you actually need. And so if you're here today, it doesn't matter what you're facing in your life, but you need that from him. Come on, just open your hands up to receive it right now. Come on, open up your hands to receive it. And let's sing this again. Let's receive first and foremost the truth that all that we need is found in him. The truth of where we need to look. We look to Jesus. Come on, let's sing it out. It's everything I need, everything I need. Our Father has it. Our Father has it. Every single time the Lord will provide. Our Father has it. Our Father has it. Everything I need, everything I need. My Father has it.